Hello, and welcome to Gloomy Realm. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that quietly draw you beyond the edge of the familiar, where forgotten places and silent shadows come alive, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, make yourself comfortable, let your body become completely still, and allow every sound of the outside world to fade into silence. Tonight, the mist begins to rise, the old paths reveal themselves, and a forgotten realm welcomes those willing to wander its endless darkness. So close your eyes, listen carefully, leave the ordinary behind, and step beyond the shadows. Welcome to the Gloomy Realm. Story 1. Before everything happened, Henry Elizabeth Maywood had lived the kind of life that people forgot as soon as they heard about it. There had been nothing special about his childhood, nothing dramatic about his family, and nothing exciting about the streets where he had grown up in Birmingham. He had been born into an ordinary home, attended ordinary schools, and followed the ordinary path that everyone around him expected him to follow. His days passed quietly, one after another, without leaving behind anything worth remembering. Later, people compared his story to one of those tales about a man leaving society behind and walking into the unknown. It was something like the story of McCandless and Supertramp, only without the donations, the noble purpose, or any real plan to escape civilization. Henry did not run away because he hated money. He did not leave because he wanted to find himself. In truth, Henry did not leave at all. Something opened for him, and he stepped through. Before that day, he worked as a clerk in a small shop. It was a dead-end job, and everyone knew it, including Henry. He stood behind a counter for hours, scanned items, counted money, answered boring questions, and watched strangers come and go. He was a clerk, and as far as anyone could tell, he was going to remain a clerk until he grew old enough to retire or died behind the register. There was no rags to riches story waiting for him. There was no hidden fortune, no sudden promotion, and no powerful person who noticed his talent. Life had given Henry nothing unusual. However, Henry was far more intelligent than most people realized. He had always been quiet, and quiet people were often mistaken for simple people. Customers saw the tired clerk standing behind the counter. His manager saw an employee who arrived on time and rarely complained. His neighbors saw a polite man who kept to himself. None of them knew what happened inside his mind. During slow hours at work, Henry wrote notes on the backs of receipts. At home, he filled cheap notebooks with equations, theories, questions, diagrams, and arguments. He studied philosophy, physics, mathematics, religion, and old scientific books. He borrowed whatever he could from libraries and bought used books whenever he had enough money. He became obsessed with one question: why did life work? Not how people survived. Not why human beings existed. Henry wanted to understand why the universe allowed anything to exist at all. Why was there matter instead of nothing? Why could life appear in a universe that seemed so cold, empty, and violent? Why did the laws of nature allow people to stand on a small planet and ask questions about the stars? Most scientists would have pointed him toward the anthropic principle. The basic idea was simple. Human beings saw a universe capable of supporting life because only such a universe could contain observers able to notice it. Henry hated that explanation. To him, it sounded like avoiding the real question. For years, he worked on another theory. He believed there was a deeper structure behind existence. He imagined reality as a system built around observation, choice, and possibility. He believed life did not exist simply because the universe happened to allow it. He believed the universe existed because life needed somewhere to look back from. One rainy afternoon, while standing behind the counter at work, Henry suddenly understood the final part of his theory. At least, he believed he understood it. He froze with a customer's item in his hand. His eyes widened. His breathing became quick and shallow. Then he dropped the item onto the counter and laughed. "I figured it out," he said. The customer stared at him. Henry grabbed a receipt and began writing on it. "I figured out why life works," he continued. "It isn't the anthropic principle. Not really. Everyone has been looking at it in the wrong direction." The customer glanced at the growing line behind them. "How much is this?" the customer asked. Henry looked up as though he had forgotten where he was. "What?" "The item," the customer said slowly. "How much does it cost?" Henry told them the price. For the rest of the day, he tried to explain his discovery to anyone who would listen. His manager told him to focus on his work. His coworkers laughed. A regular customer advised him to get some sleep. One woman moved away from the counter and asked another employee to serve her. Henry did not care. For the first time in his life, he felt important. He went home that evening, spread his notebooks across the kitchen table, and checked every part of his theory again. He stayed awake until morning. The next day, he spoke about it at work. Then, he spoke about it to his neighbors. He called people he had not spoken to in years. Most of them reacted in the same way. They stared at him as if he had lost his mind. Still, Henry continued. A few days later, he borrowed an old book from the library. It was a copy of Eureka, the long prose work published in 1848 by Edgar Allan Poe. The pages smelled of dust and age. Several sections had been marked by previous readers, and the cover was beginning to separate from the binding. Henry read it late at night in his small flat. He sat near the window with a lamp beside him, turning each page slowly. Outside, the rain touched the glass. The city moved below him, full of distant engines, footsteps, voices, and lights. As Henry read Poe's ideas about the universe, creation, matter, and the return of all things to unity, he felt a strange pressure building behind his eyes. Some of the ideas were wrong. Some were impossible. Yet parts of the book seemed to connect with his own theory in ways he had never expected. He began writing notes. Then, he noticed the doorway. It had appeared in the wall across from him. At first, Henry thought exhaustion had finally affected him. He removed his glasses, cleaned them, and put them back on. The doorway remained. It had no frame. No door stood inside it. It was simply an opening where there had never been one before. Beyond it was a vast indoor space. Henry slowly stood. His flat was small, and the wall should have opened into the neighboring apartment. Instead, he saw polished floors, glass railings, silent shops, and wide halls that stretched farther than they should have been able to stretch. It looked like a shopping mall. No, Henry thought. It looked grander than that. A galleria. The light inside was pale blue, almost cerulean, but Henry could not see where it came from. There were no visible bulbs, lamps, or signs bright enough to fill the building with such light. It seemed to exist in the air itself. High above the walkways were enormous windows. Beyond those windows was nothing. It was not darkness. It was not outer space. It was not an empty sky. It was simply nothing. Henry stepped closer to the opening. His heart was beating hard, but fear had not yet taken control of him. Curiosity was stronger. Could the truth of the universe be a shopping mall? He whispered. The idea was absurd, and Henry knew it was absurd. Still, the doorway was there. He reached through first with one hand. The air on the other side was cold and still. He moved his fingers. Nothing happened. Then Henry stepped through. His shoes touched the smooth floor of the galleria. The doorway remained behind him, showing his little flat on the other side. His lamp was still on, his book was still open on the table. Everything looked normal. Henry turned toward the impossible building. It was real. At least it felt real. The floor was hard beneath his feet. The air smelled faintly of dust, plastic, and something sweet that had gone rotten. The shops contained shelves, signs, counters, and objects. How? Henry whispered. How can this be real? He walked toward a large plant beside a bench. The leaves looked healthy, though their color seemed slightly wrong under the blue light. He grabbed one of them, wanting to prove to himself that he was not dreaming. The leaf crushed easily in his hand. A thick black liquid pushed out between his fingers. Henry pulled back in shock. The substance was dark, sticky, and almost warm. It stained his skin immediately. He rubbed his hand against his trousers, but the mark remained. The broken leaf slowly folded inward like wet flesh. Henry stepped away. For several minutes, he explored the nearby area. Some shops had names he recognized, while others had names that sounded almost normal, but not quite. Clothing hung on racks behind dusty windows. Toys sat in display cases. Food had been left on shelves. Every place looked abandoned, yet none of it looked properly old. There were no people, no music played, no machines hummed. The entire building waited in complete silence. Then, the lights went out. The blue glow vanished at once. Henry stood in total darkness. He stopped breathing for a moment. From somewhere deep inside the Galleria came a sound, scraping, then shuffling. Something was moving through the main corridor. Henry turned quickly toward the doorway that led back to his flat. It was gone. The wall behind him was smooth and unbroken. No, he whispered. He ran his hands over the surface. There was no opening, no seam, and no sign that the doorway had ever existed. The scraping sound grew louder. Henry did not wait. He ran into the nearest shop and crouched behind the counter. A faded sign above the entrance read Fred's Fawn Foods. As Henry moved, his shoe landed on something soft. There was a wet crunch beneath his foot. He looked down. A small bar of food had been lying on the floor. It was covered in thick mold of several different colors. Green, white, black, and orange growth spread over its surface. When Henry stepped on it, the bar snapped in half, releasing a rotten smell so strong that his stomach tightened. He nearly vomited. He covered his mouth with both hands and forced himself to remain silent. The sound outside continued. Scrape, shuffle, scrape, shuffle. Whatever moved through the Galleria sounded partly soft and partly hard. Henry heard something heavy dragging across the limestone floor. It reminded him of wet meat being pulled behind a block of stone. The thing entered the main atrium. Henry could not see it. He stayed low behind the counter, trembling, listening to each movement. The scraping came closer. Then it stopped outside the shop. Henry pressed one hand against his mouth. Something breathed near the entrance. The breathing was slow and rough. There was a faint clicking sound between each breath. Henry had the terrible feeling that it was smelling the air. Smelling him. Smelling its food. Several seconds passed. Then, from a shop farther down the corridor, a television suddenly came to life. A cheerful voice filled the darkness. Amazo bread. It's the bread you can throw. A bright musical tune followed. The creature outside Fred's Fawn Foods reacted immediately. It turned. Then it rushed toward the sound. Its steps were impossibly fast and painfully heavy. Stone scraped against stone. Something struck a metal bench, sending it crashing across the floor. The television advertisement continued. Amazo bread. Fun at breakfast, lunch, or any time. Then came a violent impact. Glass shattered. The television sound ended in a burst of static. Silence returned. Henry remained behind the counter. He had no idea how much time passed. It might have been 5 minutes. It might have been an hour. Fear had changed time into something shapeless. Eventually, the blue lights flickered back on. Henry waited. Nothing moved outside. Slowly, he raised his head above the counter. The corridor was empty. The broken food bar beneath his shoe was no longer covered in mold. It had become an ordinary chocolate bar, still crushed but fresh enough to eat. Henry stared at it. He did not touch it. After several more minutes, he forced himself to leave the shop. The Galleria looked the same as before, but Henry no longer felt curious. The soft blue light made everything appear calm, yet he now understood that the calmness was false. He walked toward the shop where the television had played. Its sign read the Telemporium. The place had been destroyed. Television sets lay broken across the floor. Shelves had been knocked over. Wires hung from the walls. Glass covered the entrance, and deep lines had been cut into the tile as though something made of rock had dragged itself through the room. A tall statue stood in the center of the shop. Henry stopped. The statue had a human shape, but its body was badly stretched. Its arms were too long. Its legs were too thin. Its head seemed small compared to the rest of it. It had no clear face, only shallow marks where eyes and a mouth might have been. Henry looked at it for several seconds. A statue in a technology shop made no sense. Then again, nothing in the Galleria made sense. On the counter nearby, he found a videotape. It was the only object in the shop that appeared untouched. The label contained words in another language. Beneath them was a small drawing of a person hanging from a rope. Henry lifted the tape. The words seemed to read, Lieber Herr Thoms James. Lieber Herr Thoms James, Henry said quietly, attempting to pronounce it. A VCR sat beneath one of the televisions. Henry knew using it was probably foolish. The machine could make noise. The creature might return. Yet Henry also needed answers, and the tape was the first thing in the Galleria that looked as though it had been left for someone to find. Besides, he told himself, the creature had been loud. He would hear it coming. Henry placed the tape inside the VCR. The machine pulled it in. A sharp screech burst from the television. Henry jumped back. The sound was much louder than any VH machine he had ever heard. The tape scratched and struggled inside the VCR as if the machine were chewing on metal. Then the screen came to life. Bright colors flashed across it. Purple, yellow, red. Henry squinted and turned his face away. His eyes had already adjusted to the soft blue light of the Galleria, and the sudden colors hurt. The screeching continued. Something else joined it. A voice, perhaps, or several voices. Henry could not understand the language. The words were twisted and stretched, rising and falling in unnatural ways. At times, the sound seemed human. At other times, it sounded like machinery trying to speak. Still, something about it felt familiar. Henry's eyes began to water. He did not know why. A deep sadness entered him without warning. It was not connected to any memory he could name. It felt older than his life, older than his childhood, and perhaps older than the world itself. He stumbled backward. The sounds grew louder. The blue light outside the shop seemed stronger now. It was still the same cerulean color, yet it somehow appeared bluer than before, as if the color had gained weight and was pressing against his eyes. Henry covered his ears. The sound continued inside his head. He turned away from the television. Without fully understanding why, he began walking toward one of the dark corridors at the edge of the Galleria. Darkness suddenly seemed safer, because darkness remained the same. It did not change color. It did not pretend to be peaceful. Henry entered the corridor. The blue light faded behind him. The screeching from the tape continued in his mind, even after the shop was far away. He pulled out his phone and switched on the flashlight. The battery still had power. There was no signal, no service, no emergency connection. He was completely cut off from the outside world, just as the outside world was completely cut off from him. The corridor stretched ahead. His phone light moved across closed shop doors, dusty signs, empty benches, and walls that seemed to continue forever. Henry walked slowly. Then he nearly collided with something tall. He stepped back and raised the light. It was another statue. It looked exactly like the one inside the Telemporium. Its arms hung almost to the floor. Its legs were longer than its torso. Its head tilted slightly to one side. Henry moved around it. Several steps later, he found another statue, then another, then another. They stood at different points along the corridor, always facing him. Henry tried not to look at their faces. He continued walking. The statues appeared again and again. One stood beside a bench, one waited inside a dark shop, one leaned near a wall, one blocked the middle of the corridor. Over and over, Henry passed them. He began counting. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The screeching in his head grew worse. Then he heard the scraping sound. Henry stopped. His entire body became cold. It came from behind him. Scrape, shuffle, scrape. Henry spun around and raised his phone. Dust floated through the beam. A statue stood several feet away. Only one. Henry frowned. He moved the light around the corridor. The others were gone. There were no statues beside the benches. None stood in the shops. None leaned near the walls. The statue in front of him was the only one. Henry stared at it. Its head seemed lower than before. He tried to think clearly. He had always been calm. He had always trusted logic. Even when people mocked him, Henry had believed that every mystery could be studied and every problem could be broken into smaller parts. Now that calmness disappeared. The strange sounds continued inside his mind. The statue seemed closer. Henry stepped backward. His hand shook. His phone slipped from his fingers and struck the floor. The flashlight went out. Henry ran. He did not pick up the phone. He did not look back. He ran through complete darkness, using one hand to feel the walls and the other to protect his face. He struck a bench, nearly fell, recovered, and kept moving. The corridor continued far beyond what should have been possible. No shopping mall could have been this large. Henry ran until his chest burned. He ran until his legs felt weak. He ran until he could no longer hear the scraping, because his own heartbeat was too loud. Then, without warning, he left the corridor and stumbled onto a street. Henry stopped. Streetlights stood in a long line ahead of him. Their yellow glow fell across wet pavement, parked cars, and rows of dark houses. The scene looked ordinary, but there was something empty about it. No curtains moved, no engines ran, no people walked along the road. Henry turned around. The Galleria stood behind him. It did not have a front entrance. There were no glass doors. There was no wall or sign. The building simply ended where the street began, as though someone had cut it cleanly from another world and placed it there. Henry understood that he had reached the outside. He did not know what the outside meant, but the word entered his mind with complete certainty. He took one step forward. A hand closed around his shoulder. It was cold, hard, stone-like. The fingers were too long, the grip was too large. Behind him stood something tall and thin, something whose body scraped as it moved. Henry could not turn around. He could not scream. All he could do was shudder. Then he closed his eyes. Log study 354 completed. No further human life detected. Story 2. It started with small things, the kind of mistakes that were easy to ignore. My girlfriend Steph would forget details from conversations we had only a few hours earlier. Sometimes she would tell me the same story twice in one evening, using almost the exact same words both times. Other times, she would ask a question, listen to my answer, and then ask it again a few minutes later, as though the first conversation had never happened. At first, I tried to laugh it off. Everyone forgot things. We were both busy. Steph had always been someone who got lost in her own thoughts, especially when she was painting or reading. I told myself she was stressed or tired. Maybe she was not sleeping enough. Maybe she had too much on her mind. Then she started forgetting what she was doing while she was doing it. I found her standing in the kitchen one morning with the refrigerator door open, staring at the shelves. When I asked what she was looking for, she looked at me with confusion. "I don't know," she said. Another time, she filled the bathtub, stepped away to get a towel, and forgot the water was still running. I came home to find water spreading across the bathroom floor. The moment that finally scared me happened while she was driving. She called me from a grocery store parking lot, crying because she could not remember how she had gotten there. She knew her name, she knew who I was, she knew the car belonged to her. But she could not remember leaving the house. After that, I convinced her to see a doctor. Steph did not want to go. She was embarrassed and kept saying that she was too young for anything serious to be wrong. She accused me of treating her like a child. Then, she apologized and cried against my chest. Deep down, she knew something was happening to her. The tests took several weeks. There were scans, memory exercises, blood tests, and long conversations with specialists. In the end, the doctors told us that Steph had early onset dementia. I remember sitting beside her in the doctor's office, holding her hand while the doctor explained what the diagnosis could mean. He talked about memory loss, confusion, mood changes, and changes in personality. He told us the condition would likely become worse with time. Steph did not cry in the office. She remained completely still. Her fingers slowly tightened around mine until her nails pressed into my skin. She stared at the floor while the doctor continued speaking, but I could tell she was no longer listening. She cried later that night. She cried harder than I had ever seen anyone cry. I think Steph was terrified that I would leave her after the diagnosis. We were still young. We had talked about marriage, children, traveling, and buying a house together one day. She knew I still had a whole life ahead of me, and she probably believed that staying with her would destroy it. She never said that directly, but I could see the fear in her behavior. She started watching me whenever I left a room, as though she thought I might never return. She would ask if I still loved her. Sometimes she asked several times in one night. Even when she forgot the diagnosis itself, she understood that something inside her was changing. She knew she was losing parts of herself. There were nights when she would lie in my arms and sob because she felt different. She said she felt empty, as though parts of her mind were being removed while she slept. I will never forget the way she described it. "It's like someone else is living my life," she whispered one night, "and I have no clue what they do." At the time, I thought she was trying to explain the missing memories. Now I wonder if she meant something else. As the months passed, Steph began pushing people away. She stopped answering calls from her parents. She ignored messages from friends. When anyone came to visit, she usually stayed upstairs until they left. Before the diagnosis, she had been active and creative. She worked from home as a graphic designer. She loved reading old mystery novels and painting landscapes in the spare bedroom. Our walls were covered with pictures she had made. After the diagnosis, she stopped doing all of it. Her paints dried inside their containers. Books gathered dust beside the bed. She spent most days curled beneath the blankets, staring at her phone. For a while, I accepted it. She was going through something terrible, and I loved her. I wanted her to know that I was not going anywhere. When the doctor warned me that her personality could change, I told myself I could handle it. No matter how different she became, she would still be Steph. I believed I would always be able to see the woman I loved somewhere inside her. I thought that even if the disease took her memories, I would recognize her true self beneath the confusion. The real problems began a few months later. I had just returned home from work and was preparing dinner when I received a text from Steph. "Come upstairs." I stared at the message for a moment. I had been home for almost 15 minutes and had not checked on her yet. Work had been exhausting, and I had gone straight into the kitchen without thinking. Guilt washed over me. I turned off the stove, dried my hands, and headed upstairs. Steph usually spent the afternoon in our bedroom, either lying in bed or sitting near the window with her phone. When I entered, the room was empty. "Hey, babe," I called. "What's up?" There was no answer. I checked the bathroom. Then I looked inside the closet and beneath the bed. I even checked the spare bedroom, though she had not entered it in weeks. She was nowhere upstairs. I pulled out my phone and sent her a message. "Where are you?" The message immediately showed that it had been read, but she did not reply. A nervous feeling formed in my stomach. After her diagnosis, I had installed a location sharing app on both our phones. Steph had resisted at first. She said it made her feel like a prisoner. I hated doing it, but we both knew it was necessary. If she ever wandered away and became confused, I needed a way to find her. I opened the app. According to the map, Steph was still inside the house. Our two icons were almost directly on top of each other. I searched upstairs again, calling her name more loudly. I opened every closet and checked every room. When I still could not find her, I returned to the kitchen. Maybe she had gone outside and left her phone somewhere. Wherever she was, I thought, she would come out eventually. Then I froze. The stove was on. I stood in the doorway, staring at the flame beneath the empty pan. I clearly remembered turning it off before going upstairs. "Steph?" I called. There was no response. I stepped closer to the stove and switched it off again. My eyes moved around the kitchen. Who else could have turned it on? I checked the location app again and zoomed in as far as it would allow. Steph's phone was only a few feet away from me. "Steph," I shouted. Nothing. Panic began to rise in my chest. Maybe she really had left the house without her phone. That would be even worse. She would have no way to call me if she became lost. I decided to call her number so I could find the phone first. The familiar ringtone began playing nearby. It was coming from the cabinet beside the sink. I stared at the cabinet door. Why would she put her phone in there? I stepped forward and pulled it open. I expected to see her phone lying among the cleaning products and old sponges. Instead, I found Steph inside. Her entire body had been pushed into the cabinet. For a few seconds, my mind could not understand what I was seeing. Her arms and legs were bent at impossible angles. One knee was pressed against her chest, while the other leg disappeared behind her shoulder. Her back was twisted, and her head leaned sideways against the cabinet wall. She looked like a human body that had been folded carelessly and forced into a box. "Hi, James," she breathed. Her voice sounded excited. It was almost as though we were playing a game, and she was pleased that I had finally found her. Her eyes looked through me instead of at me. She had started doing that more often during conversations. Her gaze would settle somewhere behind my shoulder while she spoke. A small smile appeared on her lips. I could not move. The cabinet was not large enough for an adult. Steph should not have been able to fit inside it, no matter how flexible she was. Her joints should have been broken. Her muscles should have torn. Yet she showed no sign of pain. She looked comfortable, happy, even. I finally rushed forward and held her face in my hands. Her neck was bent so far to one side that her ear nearly touched her shoulder. A thin line of drool ran from the corner of her mouth. I wiped it away with my thumb. "Steph, what are you doing in there?" She only smiled. "Let's get you out," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I reached inside and took hold of her arm. Slowly, I began pulling her from the cabinet. It was like undoing a knot made from bones and skin. First came one hand, then an elbow, then a leg. As I moved her, I heard soft cracking sounds from her joints. Every crack made my stomach turn, but Steph did not complain. She did not cry out or pull away. She remained calm while I unfolded her. When she was finally out, she stood beside me as though nothing had happened. She rolled one shoulder and tilted her head upright. I was horrified. This was worse than I had believed. I needed to call Dr. Yoshihara and ask if her medication should be changed. I wanted to tell Steph how dangerous her behavior was. I wanted to ask why she had hidden in the cabinet and how she had managed to fit inside. Before I could speak, she looked towards the stove. "What's for dinner?" she asked. Her voice was completely normal. The question caught me off guard. Maybe she had already forgotten what had happened. "I was going to make chicken Alfredo," I said carefully. "Your favorite." She nodded. "Why don't you sit on the couch while I finish cooking? I can turn on the fireplace. It'll be warmer there." I did not tell her that I wanted to keep her where I could see her. Steph walked into the living room and sat down. She picked up one of the pillows and placed it in her lap. Then I noticed where she was sitting. It was my side of the couch. It was a tiny detail, but it disturbed me more than it should have. Steph had always sat on the far right cushion. She said it was softer and more comfortable. I preferred the left side because it was closer to the small table where I kept my drinks. Over time, those sides had become ours. Neither of us ever discussed it. We simply knew where we belonged. That evening, Steph was sitting in my place. I told myself it meant nothing. People change seats all the time. Still, it felt wrong. "Steph," I said gently, "why don't you sit on the other side? You always liked it better." "I like this side," she replied. Her eyes followed me as I moved, but once again, it looked as though she was staring through me. I did not argue. A few weeks passed before it happened again. Dr. Yoshihara adjusted her medication, and for a while I thought things were improving. Steph seemed calmer. She spoke more clearly. She even agreed to sit outside with me one afternoon while I read to her. It was a beautiful summer day. The sky was clear, and the sunlight felt warm without being uncomfortable. I poured 2 glasses of lemonade and brought one of Steph's favorite novels onto the porch. She sat beside me while I read aloud. For the first 15 minutes, everything felt almost normal. Then Steph stood up without saying anything and walked inside. I assumed she needed to use the bathroom. I stayed on the porch, enjoying the sunlight and waiting for her to return. About a minute later, my phone vibrated. Can you come help me with something? I closed the book and went inside immediately. The house was silent. Steph? No answer. I checked the downstairs bathroom, but it was empty. I sent her a message. Where are you? Her reply came almost at once. Come find me. The words made my skin go cold. I remembered opening the cabinet and seeing her body folded inside. I remembered the strange angles of her limbs and the cracking of her joints as I pulled her out. No, I told myself. Her medication had been changed. It could not happen again. But some part of me already knew it had. I began searching through every hiding place I could imagine. I checked the cabinets first, then the closets. I looked under every bed and behind the curtains. I opened the laundry machine, the dryer, and the large storage chest in the spare room. Nothing. After nearly 20 minutes, I started to wonder if she had left the house. I was searching through the upstairs linen closet when I heard a soft giggle from downstairs. It sounded like Steph's old laugh. For one brief moment, it was exactly the way she used to laugh before the diagnosis. Light, playful, and full of life. Then a door slammed shut. I spun around and ran downstairs. My heart pounded as I entered the kitchen. The oven was on. I stopped breathing. Heat shimmered behind the glass door. No, I whispered. I rushed towards it. The distance from the doorway to the oven was only a few steps, but it felt much longer. Time seemed to slow as fear filled my mind. Please do not let her be in there. Please. My hand slipped on the handle because my palm was covered in sweat. I tightened my grip and pulled the oven door open. A wave of hot air struck my face. Steph was inside. Her limbs were tangled around one another so tightly that I could barely tell where her arms ended and her legs began. One leg was wrapped around the base of her neck. Her foot pressed against the side of her face, and her toes bent in different directions. Both arms had disappeared beneath her folded body. She had bent herself over twice to fit inside the oven. I let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a scream. There was no way she could have done that alone. Even a trained contortionist should not have been able to fit into such a small space, especially without serious injury. Steph turned her head slightly. Her empty eyes met mine. A small smile spread across her face. "You found me," she said. Her voice was clear and cheerful. She showed no sign that the heat was hurting her. Her skin was red, but she did not seem bothered by it. "Steph, what the hell are you doing?" I reached up and switched off the oven. She continued smiling. I tried to pull one of her legs free, but there was not enough room to move it. I would have to drag her out before I could unfold her. The thought made me feel sick. Her skin would scrape against the metal rack. Her joints might break. I could hurt her badly. But leaving her inside was not an option. I took hold of her shoulders and slowly pulled. Her body slid towards me. The rack scraped beneath her, producing a horrible metallic sound. As I pulled her out, her joints began cracking, one after another. Her shoulders snapped into a new position. Then her knee. Then something in her back made a deep popping sound. Steph did not scream. She kept smiling. Once she was on the kitchen floor, she began unfolding herself. Her movements were slow and careful, almost like a spider stretching its legs. I turned away and covered my mouth. I wanted to vomit. The woman I had loved a year earlier would never have done something like this. The woman I knew would have been terrified of being trapped in a dark oven. I looked at Steph and wondered who she had become. That night, after she fell asleep, I called Dr. Yoshihara. I described everything in detail. I told him about the cabinet and the oven. I explained how she folded herself into spaces that should have been impossible for her body to enter. I hated speaking about her behind her back, but the behavior was dangerous. More than that, it was terrifying. Deep down, I also needed someone else to hear it. I needed another person to tell me I was not losing my mind. I can tell this is taking a serious toll on you, James, Doctor, Yoshihara said. I don't know what to do, I replied. I can't watch her every second. What happens if she hides somewhere while I'm sleeping? What if she turns on the oven again? There was silence on the line. Then he said, "It may be time to consider professional support." My chest tightened. Do you mean a care facility? Her condition appears to have declined significantly. This behavior may be beyond what one person can safely manage at home. You have done a great deal for her, but you cannot protect her every moment of every day. His suggestion was tempting. I loved Steph, but caring for her had become exhausting. I had to explain the same things again and again. I had to remind her what she liked, who her friends were, and what she had done the day before. Sometimes it felt as though I was rebuilding her personality every morning. I was constantly searching for pieces of the old Steph, begging them to return. But she was disappearing. Maybe she was already gone. Soon after her diagnosis, Steph had made me promise that I would never place her in a care home. She had read stories about workers abusing helpless patients. The thought terrified her. She made me promise that strangers would never be responsible for her. I owed it to the woman she used to be to respect that promise for as long as I could. I'm sorry, Doctor, I said. I promised her I wouldn't. I understand, he replied. You're trying to respect her wishes. But if the situation becomes unsafe, there are resources available. Bring her into the office and we'll run more tests. Still, I need to be honest with you. Behavior like this may require trained professionals. Over the next few months, I watched Steph more closely. Her disappearances became more frequent. Whenever I looked away for too long, she would slip from the room. Moments later, I would receive a message asking me to find her. She preferred small spaces. The smaller the space, the more she seemed to enjoy it. I caught her trying to crawl into the air vents. Another time, I found her beneath the kitchen sink with her arms wrapped around the pipes. Once, she climbed halfway into the washing machine before I stopped her. Each incident frightened me more than the last. It was not only where she hid that scared me, it was what could happen while she was doing it. Her luck would eventually run out. One wrong movement could snap her neck or break a rib. She could puncture a lung. She could trap herself somewhere and suffocate. Before I found her, I knew the situation was getting out of control. When I finally began contacting assisted living facilities, it felt like a betrayal. I told myself I had done everything possible to keep her safe, but it was no longer enough. I had lost my job because I could not leave her alone long enough to go to the office. I stopped answering calls from my parents. I declined every invitation from my friends. I barely slept. Whenever I woke during the night, I immediately reached across the bed to make sure Steph was still there. My entire life had become a constant effort to prevent her from hurting herself. In trying to protect her, I had pushed away everyone who might have helped me. The day Steph disappeared was hot and humid. I spent most of the morning researching care facilities. One place seemed better than the others. It was nearby, clean, and well-maintained. According to its website, trained staff members were available 24 hours a day. I called them that afternoon, but no one answered. That evening, Steph and I ate dinner in silence. I had made chicken Alfredo again, hoping the familiar meal might bring back some memory or feeling. She barely touched it. She lifted small bites to her mouth and chewed slowly, staring at nothing. When we first started dating, she had loved that dish. She used to say it tasted better than anything she had eaten in a restaurant. I would always tell her that it was because I made it with extra love. That night, she ate as though the food had no taste at all. I was about to ask her if she liked it when my phone rang. It was the facility I had called earlier. I excused myself and stepped onto the patio. Through the large windows, I could still see Steph sitting at the table. I explained her condition to the woman on the phone. I asked about prices, rooms, and how often doctors visited. I swear I only looked away for a few seconds. When I looked through the window again, Steph's chair was empty. Fear shot through me. I ended the call quickly, telling the woman that something urgent had happened and I would call back later. My phone vibrated. Come find me. I searched the entire house. I checked every cabinet, closet, and drawer large enough to hold even part of a person. I looked inside the oven, the washing machine, and the dryer. I opened every vent I could reach. I called her phone again and again, but the calls stopped connecting. Her location disappeared from the app. For hours, I searched every crack and hidden space in the house. Eventually, I called the police. Officers searched from top to bottom. They checked the garden, the attic, the basement, and the surrounding neighborhood. They visited places Steph used to go before her illness became severe. They even searched near her childhood home. No one found her. Friends and family joined the search. Everyone was heartbroken. They printed posters and shared her picture online. Her parents drove through nearby streets every day, calling her name. I never told most of them about the places where she had been hiding. I told the police because I knew it mattered, but I could not bring myself to tell everyone else. I wanted them to remember Steph as the beautiful, talented woman she had once been. I did not want them to imagine her twisted inside an oven or folded beneath a sink. It has been about 2 weeks since she disappeared. A few days ago, a strange smell began spreading through the house. At first, it was faint. I thought food had spoiled somewhere. Then it grew stronger. It smelled like rotten meat. I knew what it meant. I knew Steph had never truly left the house. As her condition became worse, she refused to go outside. Even opening the front door made her nervous. She had to be somewhere inside. The smell was strongest in the living room. For days I tried to ignore it. I opened windows. I burned candles. I sprayed air freshener until the scent made me cough. Nothing covered it. Then I saw the maggots. They were falling from the fireplace. Small white bodies dropped from inside the chimney and crawled across the dark bricks. That was when I understood. No one had checked the chimney. Not the police, not me. Steph was inside it. She must have climbed up there while I was speaking on the phone. She must have twisted herself into the narrow space and waited for me to find her. But I never did. I still have not looked. I am too afraid to see what remains of the woman I once loved more than anything in the world. I am too afraid to imagine her trapped in the darkness, waiting for me while the hours passed. Did she call my name? Did she understand that she was stuck? Did she stay silent because she thought it was part of the game? I cannot stop thinking about what must have been happening inside her mind while she waited there until her final breath. But that is not what scares me most anymore. Last night, my phone received a message from Steph's number. "Hello, James. Come find me." I stared at the screen for several minutes. Her phone should have been dead by now. The police said it stopped connecting on the night she disappeared. Then, another message appeared. "Come find me." A third message followed. "Come find me. They have not stopped. Every few minutes, my phone vibrates. Come find me. Come find me." Come find me. The messages are coming from inside the house. And now, as I sit in the living room, I can hear something moving in the chimney. It sounds wet, slow, like a body dragging itself down through a space too narrow for any human being. A few pieces of ash have fallen into the fireplace. The maggots are moving away from it. My phone just vibrated again, but this message is different. You never found me. There is scratching inside the wall behind me now. I keep telling myself that Steph is dead. I can smell her. I can see the insects coming from the place where her body must be trapped. Yet the scratching is getting closer. Something just whispered my name from inside the fireplace. It sounded like Steph, not the frightened, confused Steph from the final months of her life. It sounded like the old Steph, the woman I fell in love with. She laughed softly and said, "Come find me." I do not think this was ever dementia. I think something was living her life. And now that Steph is gone, it is looking for somewhere else to hide. Story 3. The cold November air split the skin of my lips the moment I opened the front door. Even inside the cabin, the chill had already reached me. It had slipped through the cracks in the walls during the night and settled into my bones like it belonged there. I stood beside my bed for a few seconds, waiting for my legs to feel strong enough to carry me. Every joint in my body ached. My knees clicked when I straightened them, and my back burned as if I had slept on stone instead of an old mattress. Morning light pushed through the thin curtains. It was pale and weak, but after several hours of darkness, it still hurt my eyes. I raised one hand to block it while my pupils adjusted. Thanksgiving had arrived. I had done nothing to prepare for it. There were no decorations in the cabin, no fresh bread, no pie, no bowls filled with potatoes or vegetables. There were no relatives coming up the mountain road and no children running through the rooms. There was only me. Me, the silent cabin, and the endless wilderness of Appalachia. I had lived alone for so long that I sometimes forgot what my own voice sounded like. Days could pass without me speaking a single word. I would wake, make coffee, gather firewood, repair whatever had broken, and sit near the window until the sun disappeared behind the mountains. That was my life. Simple, quiet, and empty. The forest began less than 50 yards from my front porch. During the day, it looked old and beautiful. Tall trees climbed the hillside, their black branches reaching into the gray sky. Most of the leaves had already fallen, covering the ground in wet brown layers. At night, the forest became something else. It became a wall, a deep, black wall that swallowed every bit of light. Sometimes I would sit near the window for hours and stare between the trees. I often wondered what might be standing beyond the first few rows of trunks, hidden where my eyes could not reach. Animals, most likely. Deer, foxes, wild turkeys, and perhaps a hungry black bear searching for one last meal before winter. At least, that was what I told myself. For several days, I had been thinking about finding a turkey. I did not need a large one. I only wanted enough meat for one warm meal. It seemed foolish to care so much about it. I had canned beans, flour, dried meat, and a few vegetables stored beneath the cabin. I was not in danger of starving. But I wanted something special. I wanted to place a turkey in the oven and let the smell fill the cabin. I wanted to sit at the small kitchen table with a hot plate in front of me and pretend, just for one evening, that my life was normal. Maybe the turkey was not really about food. Maybe I wanted proof that I was still alive. For nearly a week, I had gone into the woods each morning to search for tracks. I carried my old hunting rifle, a knife, and enough water to last several hours. Every time, I promised myself I would go farther than I had gone the day before. And every time, I failed. The feeling always began a few minutes after I entered the trees. It started as a small pressure at the back of my neck. Then the pressure spread down my shoulders and across my spine. Someone was watching me. I never saw anyone. I never heard footsteps following mine. Still, the feeling was so strong that it became painful. It was as if hundreds of eyes were hidden among the trees, staring through the bark and dead leaves. Sometimes I heard a branch crack behind me. When I turned, there was nothing there. Other times, I saw movement in the corner of my eye. A pale shape would slide between two trunks, only to vanish when I looked directly at it. I tried to blame the cold. I blamed exhaustion. I blamed loneliness. But each day, I returned home earlier. By the time I reached the cabin, my hands were shaking so badly that I could hardly open the door. The nights were worse. After sunset, sounds traveled down from the hills. At first, I thought they were animals. Coyotes made strange noises. So did foxes. Even mountain lions could sound like screaming women when they called in the darkness. But these cries were different. They seemed to begin far inside the forest, deeper than I had ever walked. Sometimes the noise was a long, painful wail. At other times, it was a sharp screech that ended so suddenly, it felt as if something had closed a hand around the creature's throat. There were nights when the sounds seemed almost human. On those nights, I would stand beside the window with my rifle in my hands and stare into the darkness. Nothing ever came close enough for me to see. There was only that smooth black emptiness beyond the glass. The darkness had surrounded my life for so long that I had almost accepted it as another wall of the cabin. That Thanksgiving morning, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The chair across from me was empty, as always. Years earlier, my wife had sat there. She had hated the mountains at first. She used to complain about the cold, the poor road, and the distance from town. But after a while, she learned to love the quiet. She died before she could grow tired of it again. After her death, the cabin changed. The rooms became larger. The nights became longer. Even the ticking clock on the wall sounded louder. Friends asked me to move closer to town. My brother offered me a room in his home. I refused everyone. I told them I wanted peace. The truth was that I did not know how to return to the world. So I stayed. The years passed one after another. My hair turned gray, my hands became rough, and my body grew weaker. Each morning looked almost the same as the one before it. Wake up. Make coffee. Gather wood. Repair the cabin. Watch the forest. Sleep, then begin again. The turkey had become more than a meal. It was a purpose, even if it was a small and foolish one. Without it, there was nothing waiting for me except another cold morning. As I sat there, staring at the empty chair, I realized I was getting older without moving forward. I felt like an animal being fattened for slaughter, waiting quietly for a knife I could not see. The thought made me angry. I decided I would not spend another night hiding from the woods. If something was watching me, I would find it. If the sounds came from an injured animal, I would help it. And if the forest held nothing but my imagination, I would finally prove it to myself. I spent the day preparing. I cleaned my rifle and checked the flashlight batteries twice. I packed water, matches, a small first aid kit, and several pieces of dried meat. I also sharpened my hunting knife until the blade could cut hair from my arm. The sun began to disappear shortly after 5. Gray light faded from the sky, and shadows filled the spaces between the trees. I could have gone earlier. I should have gone earlier. But part of me wanted the darkness. I wanted to face the forest at its worst. When the last line of sunlight vanished behind the mountain, I put on my heavy coat, took my rifle, and stepped outside. The cold struck me immediately. My breath formed pale clouds in front of my face. The ground was hard beneath my boots, and ice had begun to form along the edges of the porch. The cabin looked warm behind me. Yellow light shone through the windows, offering me one final chance to turn back. I almost took it. Then a distant cry rose from the woods. It began softly, like a child calling from far away. The sound climbed higher and higher until it became a terrible scream. Then it stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the scream itself. I switched on my flashlight and entered the trees. Dead leaves broke beneath my boots. Thin branches scratched against my coat. The beam of light moved across trunks, rocks, and twisted roots. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. The forest smelled of wet earth, cold wood, and decay. I moved slowly, watching for tracks. The farther I walked, the more difficult the ground became. Roots rose from the soil like frozen snakes. Fallen branches blocked my path, and thorny plants pulled at my clothes. I checked behind me several times. The light from the cabin disappeared much sooner than I expected. Soon, I could not tell which direction I had come from. I should have marked the trees. That mistake made me nervous, but I continued. I told myself I could follow my own tracks back. If snow began to fall, I still had a compass in my pocket. Then I noticed something strange. The usual feeling of being watched was gone. I stopped walking. There was no pressure at the back of my neck. No invisible eyes followed me through the trees. For the first time in days, I felt completely alone. It should have made me feel better. Instead, it filled me with a deeper fear. The forest was silent. No insects, no birds, no wind moving through the branches. Even the sound of my own breathing seemed wrong, as though the trees were listening to it. I lowered the rifle and turned in a slow circle. My flashlight revealed nothing unusual. Still, something had changed. The woods no longer felt watchful. They felt empty. Not naturally empty, but abandoned. It was as if every living creature had sensed danger and run away. I continued forward, though each step became more difficult than the last. A smell reached me after another 100 yards. At first, it reminded me of spoiled meat. Then, it grew stronger. It smelled like blood, wet feathers, and something sweet that had begun to rot. I covered my nose with my sleeve and followed the smell. The ground started to slope downward. Between the trees, I could see a small clearing. Moonlight touched the center of it. Something dark lay on the ground. I approached carefully, raising my rifle. It was a deer, at least part of one. The animal had been opened from its chest to its stomach. Its ribs had been pulled apart so far that they touched the ground on both sides. Most of the organs were missing. There was surprisingly little blood. The deer's black eyes remained open, staring toward the sky. I wanted to leave. Every part of my body told me to turn around and run until I reached the cabin. Then I heard movement on the opposite side of the clearing, a soft, dragging sound. I raised the flashlight. Something moved behind a tree. "Who's there?" I called. My voice sounded weak. There was no answer. I aimed the rifle at the tree. I'm armed. A shape leaned out from behind the trunk. At first, I thought it was a person. It was tall and pale, standing upright like a man. Then it stepped into the moonlight. I forgot how to breathe. The creature was far too tall to be human. Its head nearly reached the lower branches, placing it at least 9 feet above the ground. 2 enormous wings rose from its back. But they were not beautiful wings. The skin around them had been stretched into long strips of red flesh. Tendons and thin ropes of muscle connected the wings to the creature's body. Feathers pushed through its skin in uneven groups. Some were white, others gray, and many were stained dark with blood. They did not sit smoothly across the wings. They looked trapped beneath the flesh, like thousands of infected hairs trying to grow from swollen skin. Yellow fluid leaked from several openings. The creature's body was painfully thin. I could see the shape of every rib beneath its pale skin. Its arms hung low, almost touching its knees, and each hand ended in long black nails. Its legs bent in several places. Thick ridges of bone separated the joints, giving them the appearance of branches that had been broken and forced back together. Its feet were wide and webbed. 4 long toes spread across the ground, each ending in a curved claw. Then I saw its face. It had no normal mouth. 4 lips met at the center of its face, forming a tight point. When the creature breathed, the lips opened in different directions. The opening looked like a flower made of flesh. Behind the lips were rows of small, sharp teeth. The mouth closed again, forming something almost like a beak. I could not move. The creature looked horrifying, but there was something else in its appearance. Something powerful. Something holy. For one wild moment, I thought I had found an angel. Not the gentle angels painted on church walls, but one of the old angels from the Bible. A creature not meant to comfort people, but to terrify them. The kind of being that appeared before men and had to tell them not to be afraid. The creature tilted its head. Its eyes were hidden beneath folds of skin, but I knew it was looking at me. The feeling I had experienced all week returned at once. Hundreds of invisible eyes pressed against me, not from the trees, from the creature. Its entire body was watching me. Each feather, each wound, each trembling piece of exposed flesh. I wanted to die in that moment, not because I hated what I saw, but because I could not understand how something so beautiful and terrible could exist in the same world as me. The rifle slipped slightly in my hands. The creature opened its mouth. A sound came from deep inside it. It was not a growl. It was singing. The voice began as a low hum and slowly grew louder. Several different tones came from the creature at the same time. Men, women, and children seemed to sing from inside its throat. I recognized one of the voices. My wife's. She said my name. I nearly dropped the rifle. The creature took one step toward me. Its webbed foot pressed into the dead leaves without making a sound. My wife's voice came again. You came for dinner. Tears filled my eyes. I knew it was not her. I knew my wife had been dead for years. Still, hearing her voice in that dark forest broke something inside me. The creature spread its wings. They were much larger than I first realized. The tips passed between the trees on both sides of the clearing. Blood and yellow fluid dripped from the feathers. The smell became unbearable. Beneath the creature's body, I noticed several piles of bones. Deer skulls, small animal bones, and human bones. A cracked rib cage lay beside the tree where the creature had been hiding. A human hand rested in the leaves. A wedding ring still circled one of its fingers. The angel took another step. This time, my body reacted. I raised the rifle and fired. The shot exploded through the forest. The bullet struck the creature's chest. A dark hole appeared between its ribs, but it did not fall. Instead, every feather on its wings turned toward me. The feathers opened. Each one contained an eye. Some were human. Others were round and black like the eyes of birds. A few were so large that they filled the entire feather. All of them stared at me. The creature screamed. It was the same sound I had heard night after night, but now it came from only a few yards away. The force of it pushed me backward. Pain tore through my ears. Warm blood ran down both sides of my neck. I fired again. The second bullet struck one of the wings. The creature twisted, and the singing voices became angry cries. I turned and ran. Branches struck my face. Roots caught beneath my boots. I crashed through the trees without knowing where I was going. Behind me, I heard the beating of wings. Each beat shook dead leaves from the branches. The voices followed me. My wife called my name. My brother begged me to stop. My mother shouted that I was running the wrong way. Then the creature began copying my own voice. It screamed from every direction. "Come back. Don't leave me. I'm alone." The last words nearly made me stop. I kept running. The flashlight beam jumped wildly across the trees. Several times, I thought I saw the cabin ahead, only to discover that the light was the moon shining through the branches. I pulled the compass from my pocket. The needle spun in circles. Something struck the ground behind me. I looked back. The creature stood between the trees, its body bent forward. Its wings dragged through the leaves. The hole in its chest was already closing. Its four-part mouth opened. My wife's voice whispered from inside it. "You wanted warmth." I ran again. I do not know how long I stayed in the forest. It may have been 20 minutes. It may have been hours. At last, I saw a square of yellow light ahead. My cabin. I forced my tired legs to move faster. The front door stood open. I knew I had closed it. I reached the porch and rushed inside, then slammed the door behind me. I pushed a chair beneath the handle and locked every window. For several minutes, I stood in the center of the room with the rifle aimed at the door. Nothing followed me. The cabin was silent. Then, I smelled cooked meat. Warm air moved through the room. I slowly turned toward the kitchen. A large roasted turkey sat in the center of the table. Steam rose from its golden skin. Plates had been placed around it. Not one plate. Two, the chair across from mine had been pulled away from the table. Something scratched against the roof. Long claws moved slowly across the wooden boards. I remained still. A soft knock came from the window behind me. I did not turn around. The glass creaked. 4 pale lips pressed against it from the outside. My wife's voice spoke through the window. "Dinner is ready. I have been sitting at the table ever since. The turkey is still warm. The smell fills the cabin, sweet and rich, exactly as I had imagined it." Outside, the angel walks slowly around the walls. Sometimes it scratches the door, sometimes it sings, and sometimes it speaks in my own voice, telling me that I have always been alone because I wanted to be found. The empty chair waits across from me. I know the creature will enter eventually. Maybe it already has. There are feathers beneath the table now. I do not remember seeing them fall. The eyes inside them are open. They are watching me while I write this. I think I finally understand why the forest felt empty. Nothing was hiding from the angel. Everything in the woods belonged to it. And now, so do I. Story 4, I replaced the real celebrity with a fictional actress and changed the graphic sexual material into disturbing psychological and body horror while keeping the original nightmare, bargain, transformation, and 304 theme. It began with a dream. At first, the dream felt warm and welcoming. I was standing in an endless room filled with golden light. There were no walls, no floor, and no ceiling. Yet I did not fall. I simply floated there while distant voices whispered around me. They spoke of desire. They said every person carried a hidden wish inside their heart. Most people buried that wish so deeply that even they could not see it. They lived ordinary lives, pretending they were satisfied, while the secret desire continued to burn inside them. Only a few people were ever given the chance to see what they truly wanted. Those people were shown a dream. In the dream, they were allowed to enter a world where their deepest wish had already come true. They could taste that life, touch it, and feel it around them. However, the voices warned that such gifts were never free. Then, the golden light above me became dark. I saw two figures watching each other from opposite sides of the empty space. One stood inside a bright white glow. The other was surrounded by smoke and fire. The figure in the flames looked upward. "Give me a few of them," he said. "Let me show them what the world can offer. I will prove that a person who sins is a person who truly lives." The figure in the light answered calmly, "I will allow you to test a few. We will see whether your promises are stronger than what waits for them after their lives are finished." The moment those words were spoken, the empty space filled with people. They danced around me in circles, smiling with mouths that were too wide. Their faces kept changing. Some looked young, some old, and some barely looked human. They repeated the same words again and again. "For 7 years you shall be." A woman appeared in the center of the circle. Her name was Clara Vale. She was a famous actress whose movies I had watched for years. I had always been fascinated by her. It was more than simple admiration. There had been moments when I looked at her face on a screen and felt something painful growing inside me. I did not only want to meet her, I wanted to know what it felt like to be her. I wanted her confidence, her beauty, her voice, and the way the entire world seemed to notice her whenever she entered a room. I wanted to look into a mirror and see her face looking back at me. In the dream, Clara slowly raised her hands and touched her cheeks, her hair, and her shoulders. "You wondered what it would feel like," she whispered. "You wanted to become more than yourself." The dancers moved closer. "For 7 years, you can be her," they said. Their voices became deeper. But only for 7 years. I woke up at work. I was standing alone in a dark grocery store aisle. The overhead lights flickered weakly, and the refrigerators made a low humming sound. I could not remember arriving there. I could not even remember what day it was. The aisle in front of me seemed much longer than it should have been. The shelves stretched farther and farther into darkness until they became 2 black walls. At the end of the aisle stood a door. A glowing sign hung above it. "Welcome to your desire." Another sign flashed beneath it. "There is plenty to choose from, but only one desire will choose you." I should have turned around. Instead, I walked toward the door. More signs appeared as I moved closer. "Enter at your own risk. Every door hides something you have always wanted. What you accept will also accept you." I opened the door and stepped through. On the other side was a huge theater filled with empty seats. Bright lights shone upon a stage where a smiling host stood with his arms stretched toward me. He wore an expensive black suit, but his skin looked gray and dead. His smile never moved, even when he spoke. "Come closer," he said. "We have prepared a feast from the flesh of your desire." Behind him, a line of people waited beside another door. Each person knocked 3 times before entering. The host pointed toward them. 3 times you asked for her. On the 3rd day, you will receive her. Her life will cover yours. Her memories will enter your mind. Her face will burn itself into your flesh. The theater lights began to shake. If you continue without understanding the price, you will spend eternity searching for the person you once were. A golden statue rose from the stage. It looked like Clara Vale, but when the light touched it, I saw that it was not made of gold. It was made of skin. The statue turned its head toward me. Its eyes opened. The audience seats were no longer empty. Hundreds of shadowy figures sat watching me. They clapped as the statue slowly reached out its hand. "You wanted the world to see you as her," the host said. "Now the world will see exactly what you desired." The statue's skin began to stretch from its body toward mine. Before it touched me, I woke again. This time, I was sitting on a wet street corner. Cold rain fell around me. Across the road, a large clock was fixed to the side of a brick building. It read 3:04. People walked past without looking at me. None of them carried umbrellas. Their clothes were soaked, yet they acted as though the rain did not exist. A television sat in the window of a closed electronics shop. An old comedian was performing on the screen. He shouted about love, pain, and people who kept returning to the same kind of suffering. The crowd on the television laughed. Then a man appeared directly in front of me. He had long brown hair and wore a torn coat that looked much too large for him. He held both hands against his cheeks and stared at me with wild eyes. "Do not worry about the pain you felt for her," he said. "Very soon that pain will seem small." He looked at the clock. My, would you look at the time? "It is 3:04. I have places to go and people to see, but first there are things you must see." He spun around and pointed down the street. The road disappeared into thick black fog. "A road goes somewhere," he said. "But this road is not for you. You have nowhere left to go. You only have people to meet." A bus came rushing out of the fog. A man suddenly appeared in the road. The bus struck him and rolled over his body before stopping beside us. The doors opened. The dead man stood up as if nothing had happened. His body was bent in terrible places, yet he calmly climbed aboard. The driver leaned toward me. "Come aboard," he said. "This bus is heading straight to hell." I did not move. "What are you waiting for?" the driver asked. "Your ride is here." The long-haired man laughed. "Do not rush him. His little life is still being prepared." He walked away, shouting that he had other people to visit. I remained against the brick wall, cold and confused. Another man with the same long brown hair passed me a few minutes later. Perhaps it was the same man. Perhaps there were many of them. 3:04 is approaching," he whispered. "Soon you will know more than you ever wanted to know." I looked at the clock. It still read 3:04. The people around me began to dance. "In a dream you will first see," they sang. "Then you will become what you were meant to be." A strange feeling moved through my body. A car passed through the intersection. Clara Vale was driving it. For 1 second, she looked directly at me. The long-haired man ran beside the car with his arms stretched out as though he were pretending to drive. "There she goes." He shouted. "There goes the woman you wanted to become. Run fast enough, and perhaps you can catch her." I did not understand. A flash of white light blinded me. Clara was suddenly standing only a few feet away. She stared into my eyes as she slowly touched her face and ran her fingers through her dark hair. "You want this life, do you not?" she asked. The long-haired man copied her movements. "You wanted to know what it felt like," he said. "For 7 years you can know." Clara disappeared. The rain became heavier. The drops felt like pieces of ice striking my skin. The street changed beneath me. I was no longer sitting in an ordinary town. I was standing beside a black highway beneath a red sky. A sign leaned beside the road. "Welcome to hell. Here we will know you as you wanted to know her." A voice spoke from somewhere behind me. "Remember that this is what you asked for." I did not ask for this. I shouted, "Tell me what is happening." The long-haired man appeared again. He looked down at me, holding his face in false surprise. "You will call for God. he said. But you will find no answer here. He pointed toward the red sky. You wanted another person's life. Now you will learn the sorrow hidden inside that desire. Clara appeared in the road. Her face looked beautiful, but her eyes were empty. She reached toward me. Feel what I feel, she whispered. Know what I know. The long-haired man jumped onto the hood of a moving car. The driver slammed on the brakes, throwing him onto the road. He stood again, laughing. You will feel her forever, he shouted. Every joy and every pain. The woman driving the car jumped out and ran toward me. Follow me, she screamed. I will show you the way out. She turned and ran down the road, crying that she was going to hell. Another car struck her. Her body vanished beneath the wheels. I could still hear her voice after the car had passed. I am going now, she whispered. I am going home. A man with long black hair approached me. Unlike the others, he wore the uniform of a local sheriff. Well, he said, what have we found here? Another car drove onto the sidewalk and crashed into a wall. The driver climbed out, placed a gun against his head, and said he would show me what death looked like. Before I could stop him, he fired. The sheriff barely reacted. Another busy day, he said. He placed one hand on my shoulder. My name is Sheriff Azazel. I will do my best to help you. The long-haired man appeared behind him. I would not trust that one, he warned. He will lead you somewhere you cannot return from. Azazel turned toward him. Do you not have somewhere else to be? The dead driver raised his head from the pavement. They will show you the way, he said. All the way to hell. His body burst into flames. He laughed while he burned. Sheriff Azazel checked his watch. 3:04, he said. He called to one of his deputies. What is today's date? The deputy shouted from across the road. June 6th, 2026, Azazel smiled. Before I could ask what that meant, I saw Clara again. She stood beneath a streetlight holding a red candy on a white stick. She slowly turned it between her fingers while staring at me. Azazel followed my gaze. Imagine trying to reach the center of something that only becomes hotter the deeper you go, he said. The dead woman from the road appeared behind Clara. Flames covered her body. It is hot down here. She screamed. Azazel tightened his hand around my shoulder. Calm yourself. We should get you something to eat. There is a diner across the street. He led me into a police station first and pointed toward a bathroom. I went inside to wash my face. The light above the mirror flickered. For a few seconds, my reflection looked normal. Then the light went out. A woman dressed in white appeared in the glass behind me. Look carefully, she whispered. See where it began. Images moved across the dark mirror. I saw myself sitting alone at home, watching Clara's movies. I saw myself staring at photographs of her. I saw pages filled with words I did not remember writing. I saw the same sentence repeated hundreds of times. I want to be her. You will never have a normal life again, the woman said. This is only what you wanted to see. She pointed toward the clock above the bathroom door. It read 3:04. Beneath the numbers were 3 words. She is coming. I ran from the bathroom. I pushed through the police station doors and stumbled into the rain. I want to go home. I screamed. The long-haired man stood beside the road. Where do you think you are going? He asked. You have no home until the time arrives. The driver who had shot himself appeared inside the rain. Fire poured from the wound in his head. I want to go home too, he mocked. I fell to my knees. Azazel grabbed my shoulders. I am trying to help you, he said. But you must remain calm. How can I remain calm after everything I have seen? He looked toward the burning man. Imagine what he is seeing. Then he smiled. Besides, it is still 3:04. The diner across the road looked warm and safe. I followed him inside because I had nowhere else to go. Azazel greeted everyone as though they were old friends. The customers smiled at him, but none of them looked at me. A couple entered while arguing. The man checked his watch. It is already 3:04. Can we please eat? The woman turned toward me. She is coming, she said. Who is coming? The man asked. The waitress, I hope. I am starving. The long-haired stranger walked past their table. I am sure we can fit you in, he said. Time is always important. The hungry man suddenly collapsed. His wife screamed. A waitress looked over from behind the counter. Another one? She asked. This is going to be a busy morning. For a moment, the diner disappeared. I was standing before Clara again. Shadowy figures danced around her. You wanted her face, they whispered. You wanted her voice. You wanted the world to look at you the way it looked at her. The dead customer sat up. And all I wanted was breakfast, he complained. Azazel pointed toward the kitchen. Imagine being placed in an oven while everyone around you enjoys the meal. The clock above the counter read 3:04. Clara opened a door behind the counter. Beyond it was a long, dark hallway. A waitress came out carrying a slice of blueberry pie. She placed it in front of me. You should eat before you die, she said. The receipt beside the plate showed a total of $3.04. I looked toward the kitchen and saw the long-haired man sitting at a table. He was cutting into something that looked like roasted meat. A scream came from inside the oven. The dead customer was trapped behind its glass door. The shadowy figures gathered around Clara. Her life is almost ready for you, they chanted. 3:04. Would you like some pie? A worried father entered the diner carrying a missing person poster. Sheriff, he begged, my son is missing. Have you seen him? Azazel studied the photograph. He looks familiar, he said, but after arriving here, everyone begins to look the same. The father started to cry. Azazel smiled at me. Perhaps we should let him see where his son went. The lights went out. The father screamed once. When the lights returned, only a small pile of ash remained beside the door. There is always more pie, Azazel said. We never run out. The loneliness I felt at that moment was worse than my fear. I understood that no one in the diner was going to help me. They were all part of the same nightmare. The waitress placed the bill on the table. The total still read 3:04 cents. The long-haired man checked the clock. Almost time to pay. Everyone in the diner began to dance. This is the loneliest place you will ever know, they sang. You will be surrounded by screams, but no one will ever hear yours. Outside the window, a road sign appeared. One way. No exit. Hell is where you will be. The diner changed into a hospital. I was lying on a bed while Sheriff Azazel stood beside me. Clara appeared near the window. A body you wanted, Azazel whispered. An old comedian appeared on the television, shouting about people who spent their lives trying to entertain others until they forgot who they were. Azazel leaned closer. Do not worry. You will certainly be the center of attention where you are going. The hospital staff gathered around me. Every nurse had Clara's face. Every name badge read Clara Vale. They placed their hands on my arms, legs, chest, and face. Wherever they touched me, my skin began to burn. The clock above my bed read 3:04. Time to begin your journey, Azazel said. One of the nurses took my hand and pressed it against her cheek. Try to remember, she said. Remember the first time you wished to be me. My palm burned against her skin. You are only seeing what we choose to show you. Another nurse entered. I think the patient should stay overnight, she told Azazel. Azazel headed for the door. I tried to convince myself that everything would be all right. He stopped and looked back. No, he said, as though he had heard my thoughts. There will be many people where you are going, but no one will ever visit you. In the next room, an old man sat alone beside a window. How are you today? He asked. I could be better. He laughed. His face changed into Clara's face. Then the walls around him opened, revealing flames and rows of people trapped behind glass. You wanted another life, the old man said. Now every hungry thing below will want yours. His nameplate read Zozo. Clara walked from the room, holding the red candy. He says he will see you in hell, she told me. The long-haired man stood behind her, pointing toward the clock. 3:04. Clara looked almost sad. You are frightened, she said. You should be. You may believe that life continues after tonight. For you, it will not continue in the way you remember. Another nurse entered. Her face was also Clara's. She placed a hand against my forehead. Let us get you started. The television showed dozens of versions of Clara dancing in a circle. You are going to feel everything, they said. The nurse held up a script. On the first page were the words, "This little slice of life is to die for." A script written only for you, she said. I saw a girl sitting beneath the stars. She looked upward, waiting for something she could not name. You saw her years ago, the nurse whispered. You felt connected to someone you did not know. Later, you saw Clara and believed she was the answer. You never understood why. The dead diner customer appeared beside the bed holding another copy of the script. No one else has ever read this, he said. The nurses circled me. 3:04, they whispered. You will never know why. You will only know who. Azazel stood in the corner eating blueberry pie. The clock read 3:04. She comes. The hospital vanished. I found myself sitting on the steps of a church. Morning light was beginning to rise over the buildings, but the streets were empty. I could take no more. What did I do? I whispered. A dark figure walked toward me. The closer he came, the colder the air became. Voices surrounded the church. Well, someone has found his way back to us. We knew you would return. We knew what would break you. What do you mean? I shouted. I have never been here before. The dark figure stopped at the bottom of the steps. Is this not what you wanted? He asked. Is this not what you wrote? What did I write? He raised one hand. I will open your mind for a moment. You will see the rest of the dream. The church doors opened behind me. Inside stood a tall mirror. I approached it slowly. Words were written across the glass. You sold your soul for her. For 7 years you shall be her. Images filled my mind. I remembered the dreams. I remembered knocking 3 times on a door. I remembered asking to leave my own life behind. I remembered promising anything if I could wake with Clara's face, Clara's body, and Clara's voice. You understood the bargain, the dark figure said. You simply chose to forget it. Another sentence appeared on the mirror. The lawless one is coming. What you saw was only part of what will follow. For 7 years, you shall be her. The church disappeared. I was walking beside a set of railway tracks through a black and empty land. The tracks ended at the edge of a deep pit. The long-haired man waited there. He laughed and vanished into the night. Memories of my family and friends came back to me. I saw everyone who had ever known me. One by one, their faces faded. No one was coming to find me. No one could help me. I had traded away the part of me they loved. I returned to the church steps as the sun rose. My hands looked different. They were smaller and smoother. Dark hair fell across my face. I touched my cheeks. They were not mine. In the glass of the church doors, Clara Vale stared back at me. I had become her. The voices returned. The fruit was shown to you, and you ate it. Since the beginning of time, people have failed to refuse what temptation offers. The old comedian appeared on a television inside a shop window. He still has to wake up as her, he shouted. The long-haired man stood beside the television. Do not worry, he said. When you wake, everything will feel different. The world will look at you and see the person you desired. He stepped closer. Go and live your new life while you can. When you awaken, you will be her for 7 years. His smile widened. After 7 years, the bargain will be complete. The clock inside the shop window changed. For the first time, it moved forward. 3:05. I woke in a strange bedroom. Sunlight entered through white curtains. Expensive clothes hung inside an open wardrobe. Framed movie posters covered the walls. I slowly climbed out of bed and walked toward a mirror. Clara Vale looked back at me, my eyes filled with tears. For a brief moment, joy rose inside my chest. The dream had come true. I had her face. I had her life. I had everything I once believed I wanted. Then I noticed a message written in the steam on the mirror. 7 years remain. Behind my reflection, the long-haired man stood smiling. You received your desire, he whispered. Now let us see whether you can survive it. I turned around. The room was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the words had changed. The clock has started. Story 5. When our daughter Ophelia was born, the doctor told us she had Williams syndrome. Elena and I were sitting beside her tiny hospital bed when he explained it. Ophelia was wrapped in a white blanket, sleeping with one hand near her face. She looked peaceful. Perfect. Too small to carry all the worries the doctor was placing in front of us. He told us she would probably have developmental delays. Learning might be difficult for her, especially when it came to numbers and certain everyday tasks. She might have problems with her heart. She would need regular medical visits as she grew older. Then he told us something else. Children with Williams syndrome are often extremely social, he said. She may be very friendly and trusting. She might feel close to people very quickly, even strangers. Elena looked down at our baby. Is that bad? She asked. The doctor paused before answering. It can be beautiful, he said, but it can also be dangerous. You'll need to teach her about boundaries. She may not naturally understand why she shouldn't trust everyone. Then he smiled gently. She'll probably love people unconditionally. At the time, those words sounded sweet. They sounded like a blessing. By the time Ophelia was 6, they terrified us. Ophelia loved everyone she met. She loved the mailman, even though she only saw him for a few minutes each day. She loved the old woman who sold fruit near the road. She loved the tourists who accidentally drove up our narrow driveway while looking for a waterfall. She loved stray dogs, noisy chickens, lizards on the porch, and even the large spiders Elena refused to go near. Ophelia had a round face, bright eyes, and the widest smile I had ever seen. Her voice was soft, but musical. When she spoke, strangers often stopped and listened. She had a way of making people feel important, even when she had only known them for a few seconds. She struggled with numbers. At 6 years old, she still mixed up 3 and 8, and counting money was almost impossible for her. But she knew the words to every Bad Bunny song she had ever heard. She could hear a song once and remember the melody for weeks. Music made her happy. People made her happier. Elena worried all the time. "You can't hug every person you meet," she would tell her. "But they look sad," Ophelia would answer. "That doesn't mean you know them. But maybe they need a hug." It was hard to argue with her because she never spoke from disobedience. She truly believed everyone deserved kindness. We lived outside Utuado, in the mountains of Puerto Rico. The roads around our home twisted through steep hills and thick green forests. At night, the kokyu frogs called from every direction, filling the darkness with their high, repeating songs. Our house was small but comfortable. It had belonged to my father before he died. Behind it stood his old chicken coop, patched with wire and pieces of wood. Near the coop was a small patch of plantains, a mango tree, and an old stone wall that separated our land from the thicker part of the forest. The wall had been there longer than anyone could remember. My father used to say it had been built before his grandfather was born. Ophelia liked to sit near it. That should have worried me more than it did. One evening, just before sunset, I stepped outside and noticed her at the far end of the yard. She was crouching beside the stone wall. Her back was turned to the house, and she seemed to be looking at something in the weeds. "Ophelia," I called. She did not answer. I walked toward her. At first, I thought there was a cat beside the wall. Then, I saw the legs. It was a goat. The animal belonged to Don Pedro, our closest neighbor. His house was farther down the mountain, hidden behind plantain trees and tall grass. The goat lay on its side, stiff and pale beneath its brown fur. Its eyes were open. There were 2 small holes in its neck. I looked around for blood, but there was none. Not on the grass, not on the stones, not even around the wounds. The goat looked empty, almost like something had drained the life from inside it. Ophelia turned and smiled at me. "Pappy," she said, "he's hungry." The words made me stop. "Who's hungry?" She pointed behind the wall. Something moved. I saw it for only a few seconds, but that was enough. It was low to the ground, about the size of a large dog, but it was much thinner. Its gray skin looked tight over its ribs. Short, dark spines ran down the center of its back. Its legs seemed too long, and the joints bent at strange angles. Then it raised its head. Its eyes reflected the light from our porch. They glowed red. The creature opened its mouth and made a sound like a newborn baby crying. Every hair on my arms stood up. I grabbed Ophelia and pulled her against me. "Inside," I said, "but Poppy, he's nice." The creature hissed, its lips pulled back, showing narrow teeth. I lifted Ophelia and carried her toward the house. She kicked and reached over my shoulder. "Wait." Tito. Elena was standing in the doorway. She must have seen my face because she did not ask questions. She pulled Ophelia inside, and I slammed the door behind us. "Lock the windows," I said. "What happened?" "Just lock them." That night, Don Pedro came to our house carrying a flashlight and an old shotgun. He was nearly 70, but he still walked through the mountains like a younger man. His face became hard when he saw the dead goat. I told him what I had seen behind the wall. He crossed himself. "Chupacabra," he said. I almost laughed. People had been using that word since I was a child. Every missing chicken, every dead goat, every strange sound in the forest became a chupacabra story. Most of us treated it like a joke, something Boricuas said to frighten tourists or tease people from the mainland. Don Pedro, it was probably a sick dog, I said. A dog does not leave an animal without blood. There could be another explanation. "What kind?" I had none. Elena stood behind me with her arms crossed. "We should call animal control," she said. Don Pedro shook his head. "They'll send a boy with a net." From the back bedroom, Ophelia shouted, "His name is Tito." Don Pedro slowly turned toward the hallway. "What did she say?" "She thinks the animal is her friend," Elena said. Don Pedro crossed himself again. "You need to keep her away from it." "We know that," I answered. His eyes stayed on the dark hallway. "I don't think you understand." The next morning, all the chickens were gone. The coop door was hanging open. Part of the wire had been pulled away from the wood. Feathers were stuck everywhere, but once again, there was no blood. I found a trail of white and brown feathers leading toward the stone wall. Alina told me not to follow it. I took my father's old shovel and went anyway. The forest was strangely quiet. Even the insects seemed to have stopped. Behind the wall, I found the chickens. They had been placed in a neat pile. Each one had small puncture wounds in its neck. Their bodies looked dry and light, almost like empty bags covered in feathers. Beside the pile were 3 mangoes from our tree. There was also a bracelet. It had been made from tiny chicken bones tied together with grass and thin vines. I stared at it for a long time. It was not random. It was a gift. When I returned to the house, Ophelia was sitting at the kitchen table with crayons spread around her. She was drawing our home. She had drawn the green mountains, the mango tree, the chicken coop, and the old wall. Alina and I stood near the house. Ophelia had drawn herself near the wall beside a gray animal with red eyes. Around the creature's neck was a bright red collar. "Can we keep him?" she asked. "No," I answered too quickly and too loudly. Her face changed at once. That was one of the hardest things about Ophelia. She felt every emotion completely. Happiness filled her whole body. Sadness did the same. There was no middle ground. Her lower lip began to shake. "He doesn't have a family," she said. "He is dangerous." "He's not. He killed Don Pedro's goat. He killed our chickens. He was hungry. That doesn't make it safe. He said he won't bite me." Elena dropped the plate she was washing. It hit the sink and broke in half. "What do you mean he said that?" she asked. Ophelia looked at us with honest confusion. "He talks to me." My stomach tightened. "When?" "At night." "How does he talk?" She tapped one finger against her forehead, like this. Elena came away from the sink. "What does he say?" "He says he's lonely. He says people always chase him away. He says I'm nice because I'm not scared. You need to stop listening to him," I said. "But Poppy, no, you will not go near the wall. You will not open the windows at night. You will not talk to that thing." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "He likes me. He is an animal. He understands me better than you do." Then she ran to her bedroom and slammed the door. Elena looked at me. She has never said anything like that before. I know. What if this is part of her condition? You think she imagined it? I don't know what to think. Neither did I. That afternoon, I checked every window. I repaired the coop, even though there were no chickens left. I put a new lock on the back door. Then I cut down the tall grass near the wall so nothing could hide there. As I worked, I felt watched. Every time I looked toward the forest, I saw only trees. That night, we did not let Ophelia sleep alone. Elena lay beside her while I sat in a chair near the bedroom door. I kept a machete across my knees. It had belonged to my father and was still sharp enough to cut through thick plantain stalks. Nothing happened. The next night, I stayed outside Ophelia's room again. Around midnight, the coqui frogs stopped calling. All of them. The silence came suddenly. One moment the mountain was alive with noise. The next, there was nothing. No frogs, no insects, no wind. Then I heard something move outside the window, a light scratching sound. I stood and raised the machete. The sound stopped. After several minutes, the frogs began again. The third night was the same. At midnight, silence, then scratching. When I looked outside the next morning, I found small claw marks in the wooden wall beneath Ophelia's window. On the fourth night, I fell asleep in the chair. I do not know how long I slept. I woke to the sound of Ophelia giggling. At first, I thought she was dreaming. Then she whispered, "You came back." I stood so quickly that the chair fell behind me. I opened the bedroom door. The window was raised. The curtain moved in the warm night air. Ophelia sat on the bed with her legs crossed. She was smiling at the corner of the ceiling. "Tito came back," she whispered. I followed her eyes. At first, I saw nothing. Then I turned on the light. The creature was on the ceiling. It clung to the wooden boards like a giant lizard. Its claws were buried deep in the wood. Its gray body looked larger than it had outside. Its belly was swollen, and dark liquid hung from its mouth in long strings. Alina woke and screamed. The creature turned its head toward me. Its red eyes were not the eyes of a normal animal. There was thought inside them. I raised the machete and swung. The blade missed the creature and struck the wall. It dropped from the ceiling. It landed between me and Ophelia without making a sound. Elena pulled herself against the headboard. I expected the creature to attack our daughter. Instead, it lowered its head. It moved closer to her like a dog asking to be touched. Ophelia reached out. "No," I shouted. She froze. The creature lifted its head and looked at me. Its eyes narrowed. In that moment, I understood something terrible. It knew I was the obstacle. It knew Ophelia wanted it. It knew I was the one keeping them apart. The creature leapt. It hit me with enough force to throw me into the dresser. The wood cracked against my back. Pain exploded through my shoulder, and the machete fell from my hand. The creature landed on top of me. Its claws tore through my shirt and dug into my skin. Its face moved close to mine. Its breath smelled like wet soil and spoiled meat. Its mouth opened near my throat. I could see every tooth. I tried to push it away, but it was much stronger than it looked. Then Ophelia screamed, "Don't hurt my pappy." The creature stopped. Its mouth was only inches from my neck. It slowly turned toward her. Ophelia was crying now. Tears covered her face. "You promised," she said. The creature backed away from me. It looked at her for several seconds. Then it made a sound like air escaping from a tire. It climbed the wall, squeezed through the open window, and disappeared into the night. We left before sunrise. Alina packed one bag. She threw clothes into it without folding anything. I carried Ophelia to the truck because she refused to walk. She cried into my neck. "Is Tito going to be lonely?" she asked. "No," I said. "Who will take care of him?" "He can take care of himself." "Will he think I left because I don't love him?" "No." That was another lie. Sometimes fathers lie because the truth is too heavy for a child. Sometimes we lie because we are frightened too. We drove to San Juan and stayed with Elena's sister, Marisol. She lived in an apartment building surrounded by traffic, concrete, bright streetlights, and people. It felt safe because it was nothing like the mountains. There were no thick forests outside the windows, no old stone walls, no dark fields where something could hide. For the first few days, Ophelia barely spoke. She sat near the apartment window and watched the streets below. Sometimes she sang quietly to herself. Sometimes she drew pictures of Tito. In every drawing, the creature stood closer to her. Elena threw the pictures away when Ophelia was not looking. I told her not to do that. I don't want that thing in this house, she said. It's only a drawing. No, it's an invitation. I wanted to tell her she was being unreasonable, but after what we had seen, I no longer knew what unreasonable meant. Don Pedro called us 3 days after we left. 2 more goats had been found dead. Then several dogs disappeared. A man who lived 2 houses from Don Pedro swore he heard a baby crying near the trees at 3 in the morning. Are you coming back? Don Pedro asked. No. Good. There was something in his voice. What happened? He was quiet for a moment. It comes to your house every night. My hand tightened around the phone. How do you know? I see it on the roof. I looked toward Ophelia. She was sitting at the table, humming while she colored. Does it go inside? No, but it waits. For what? Don Pedro did not answer. That night, Alina found something outside the apartment door. She had gone to take out the trash. A few seconds later, she came back inside and called my name in a whisper. Mateo. I went to her. She stood near the open door, pale and shaking. On the welcome mat was a collar. It had been made from vines twisted tightly together. The vines were wet and covered in dark mountain mud. Tied to the collar was one of Ophelia's hair clips. It was a small yellow clip shaped like a butterfly. Ophelia had lost it several weeks earlier near the old stone wall. Elena picked up the collar with a plastic bag and threw it into the trash chute. Then she locked the door. After that, we stopped letting Ophelia stand near the windows at night. We closed the curtains before sunset. We checked the hallway every time we heard a sound. We asked the building manager if anyone had seen a strange dog. He laughed and said animals were not allowed inside. I did not explain further. Days passed. Nothing happened. I began to think maybe the collar had been left at our door by someone playing a cruel joke. Maybe Don Pedro had sent it without understanding how much it would scare us. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. Then, last night, I woke shortly after 2 in the morning. Elena was asleep beside me. The apartment was silent. At first, I did not know what had awakened me. Then I heard Ophelia's voice. Poppy. She was standing in the living room. I got out of bed and found her pressing her face against the apartment window. The curtains were open. Ophelia, step away from there. She did not move. Poppy, she said again, very softly. I walked toward her and placed one hand on her shoulder. What is it? She pointed down. We were 6 floors above the street. Cars were parked along the road. A streetlight flickered near the corner. Everything looked empty. Then I saw movement beneath a parked car across from the building. 2 red eyes opened in the darkness. They were too far apart to belong to a cat, too high from the ground to belong to a rat. The creature crawled slowly from beneath the car. Its body looked thinner than before. Its gray skin stretched tightly over its ribs. The spines along its back rose as it looked up at our window. 6 floors above it, directly at us. Ophelia smiled. He found us, she said. I pulled her away from the glass and closed the curtains. Below us, something made the sound of a crying baby. The sound rose through the street, echoed between the buildings, and stopped beneath our window. Then I heard scratching against the front door.